The red ships filled the void around Kepler Station like angry wasps orbiting their hive. Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant, watching the enemy through vast panes of reinforced glass. 14 warships, massive, crimson-hulled constructs of the Zephyrian Collective, had locked their formation around the fragile mining station 3 days earlier. Their hulls gleamed like wet blood beneath the light of the system's twin suns. The Zephyrians wanted something. And the people within Kepler Station were unwilling, or unable, to give it. Inside that battered habitat were 15,000 refugees from malaria, families who had fled when their world burned. Now the Zephyrians demanded their return. Everyone knew what that meant. Everyone knew what happened when the collective claimed its property. The Defiant drifted unseen, hidden within the tumbling shards of the system's asteroid belt. She was a strong ship, new and bristling with the latest human technology, but she was just one vessel against 14. A single predator surrounded by a pack. On the bridge, Lieutenant Amy Brooks sat before a crescent of glowing displays, her eyes fixed on enemy trajectories. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a knot that looked as tight as her focus. She hadn't moved in hours, save for the flicker of her hands across the controls. "Captain," she said softly, still staring at the data, "the Zephyrians are charging their main weapons. The station's shields won't survive a direct strike." The words hung heavy in the air. Commander Lisa White, Jake's second-in-command, stepped close to his chair. 5 years of serving together had given her the quiet courage to speak when others would not. Her voice was low, meant only for him. "Sir, you know the Council's orders. We don't interfere. Not in disputes between alien species. We observe. Nothing more." Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew she was right. Since humanity's admission into the Galactic Council 5 years earlier, they had been treated like children among titans, tolerated, studied, guided. Earth's place was small, its voice quiet, and the rules binding it were unyielding. Observe, record, adapt. Do not interfere. The bridge dimmed as an incoming transmission cut across their systems. The Zephyrian commander's voice emerged, translated into English by the ship's AI. Cold. Flat. Emotionless. "Attention, Kepler Station. You have 1 hour to surrender the Alarian criminals, or you will be destroyed. The Galactic Council will not protect you." Jake glanced at the other observers scattered through the system, 3 Centauri Republic envoys at a safe distance, a Vega research vessel watching carefully, a hegemony monitoring platform recording every second. None moved. None spoke. This was how it always was. In this galaxy, the strong took what they wanted. The rest, observed. Amy's voice trembled slightly when she spoke again. "Captain. I'm hearing chatter from inside Kepler Station. Families are saying goodbye." A silence fell over the bridge. Every officer knew the fate of Zephyrian prisoners. They weren't killed. That would have been mercy. They were absorbed. Their minds overwritten, stripped bare, folded into the collective's endless hive of thought. A person didn't die, they ceased to exist. Pete Davis, the ship's gruff chief engineer, broke through on the comm. "Captain, the boys down here are restless. We didn't sign up to sit on our hands while families are butchered." Jake rose from his chair, pacing with that restless energy his crew knew too well. A man caged by his own conscience, searching for a way out of an impossible equation. It was the youngest officer on the bridge who spoke next. Ensign Rick Stone, barely 6 months from the academy, his voice unsteady but earnest. "Sir, there are children down there. Zephyrians are talking about genetic integration protocols. For the young ones." Jake froze. The words cut deep. He thought of his daughter, safe back on Earth. He thought of her laughter, her questions, her fragile innocence. And then he imagined her being processed. He turned slowly, meeting the eyes of his crew. Amy, who had lost her parents in the border wars before humanity joined the galactic stage. Lisa, who had grown up in refugee camps, who knew too well the taste of helplessness. Rick, who still believed in simple truths like right and wrong. They had all sworn an oath to protect the defenseless. And here they were, hiding, while children prepared to die. Jake stopped pacing. His decision was made. He touched the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. We came out here to explore. To protect. Sometimes that means following rules made by people far away. But sometimes it means doing what we know is right. Today, we show this galaxy what humans stand for. Lisa's voice was tight, almost pleading. Sir, if we do this, Earth could lose its seat on the council. Your career. Jake cut her off with a slow nod. I know. But some things are bigger than politics. He turned. Amy, plot a course out of the asteroids. I want firing solutions on their weakest flank. Rick, open a channel to Kepler Station. The bridge crew came alive, a spark igniting in every movement. Orders clicked into place. History began to shift. The Defiant was no longer hiding. For the first time, a human warship was preparing to challenge one of the galaxy's ancient predators. Rick glanced up from his console. Channel open, sir. Jake's voice carried into the void. This is Captain Martinez of the United Earth vessel Defiant. Kepler Station, hold your shields. Hold your courage. Help is on the way. Across the system, alarms sounded on every observer vessel. Reports began transmitting faster than light. Diplomats whispered. Researchers recorded. The galaxy leaned in to listen. The impossible was happening. Humanity, the youngest voice in the council, the race expected to obey and observe, was about to fight. The Defiant slid free of the asteroid shadows, prow aimed at 14 crimson giants. Her crew braced. Her captain steadied. Jake Martinez looked into the storm and did not blink. The void between the asteroids and Kepler Station stretched like a battlefield from a forgotten legend. On one side, 14 crimson predators, their hulls jagged and cruel, bristling with weapons older than humanity's written history. On the other, a single ship, small by comparison, but alive with purpose. The Defiant broke free of her hiding place, her thrusters burning cold blue. Every Zephyrian sensor lit up at once, threads of alien data weaving across the darkness. They saw her. And they laughed. Not in sound, but in the shifting patterns of their signals. To them, this was absurd. A single vessel, barely decades into spaceflight, daring to challenge the might of the collective. Amy Brooks read the signals and shook her head. Captain, they don't even see us as a threat. They think we're, what's the word, irrelevant. Jake Martinez's jaw tightened. He had seen that same arrogance in human wars long before Earth reached the stars. The powerful always laughed at the desperate. Until the desperate stopped running. Arm weapons, he said. His voice was calm, steady. A command, but also a promise. The hum of power rippled through the ship as plasma batteries came alive. Torpedo tubes locked their targets. The heart of the Defiant pulsed with stored fury. Ensign Rick Stone's hands hovered over his console, waiting. Targets locked, sir. Multiple firing solutions. Lisa White stood behind him, her face pale but resolute. One ship against 14. Jake, this isn't a battle. It's suicide. Jake's eyes never left the screen. Maybe. But sometimes you don't fight to win. You fight to be remembered. The Zephyrian fleet shifted. 3 ships broke formation, moving to intercept, their crimson hulls reflecting cold sunlight. Amy glanced at her readings. They're powering their fusion lances. One hit will gut us. Jake exhaled. Then we won't let them hit. The Defiant roared forward. Not a lumbering predator like the Zephyrians, but a wolf. Lean, sharp, built to move. Human engineers had designed her for speed, for adaptation. She wasn't the strongest ship in the galaxy, but she was something rarer, unpredictable. Fire torpedoes. Rick's hand slammed the console. 2 warheads streaked into the void, twisting with human ingenuity, projectiles that split mid-flight into clusters of micro-munitions. The Zephyrians, used to straightforward weapons, moved to intercept too late. The first crimson giant shuddered. Fire blossomed across its hull. For the first time, the collective had been wounded. The bridge erupted in restrained cheers, not wild, but fierce, defiant, alive. Amy's voice cut through. Second ship charging weapons. The Defiant rolled hard to port, gravity compensators groaning as the crew were pressed into their seats. A beam of white fire ripped past, so close it seared the ship's shields to amber. Pete Davis's voice crackled from engineering. Shields holding, barely. Another hit like that and you'll be walking home. Jake grinned despite the chaos. Noted. Let's make sure they don't get another hit. The battle turned into a dance. The Zephyrians were massive, each ship a floating fortress. But fortresses were made for sieges, not duels. The Defiant slipped between them, her thrusters screaming, her crew working as one. Plasma fire burst from her guns, carving scars across crimson steel. Rick's voice rose in disbelief. Direct hit. Their ventral batteries are offline. For a moment, it seemed impossible. A human ship, an infant among ancients, was striking blows the collective had never suffered before. But 14 was still 14. The remaining fleet shifted, their patterns changing. Laughter gave way to anger. They spread out, surrounding the lone predator in a tightening noose. Amy's face was pale. They're adapting. They're not making the same mistakes twice. Lisa whispered the words no one wanted to hear. They're learning faster than we can fight. On the screen, Kepler Station shone faintly in the distance. Families huddled behind shields, listening to every word, watching every move. To them, the Defiant was more than a ship. It was a miracle. Jake saw it too. He thought of those children, of his own daughter, and he knew retreat was impossible. Even if they died here, the message would live. Humanity had stood. Humanity had fought back. Pete, he said into the comm, I need everything. Shields, engines, weapons. Overclock it all. There was a pause, then the engineer's gruff laugh. You'll burn her out, Jake. But hell, better to burn bright than fade quiet. You'll get your power. The deck vibrated as the ship surged forward, every system screaming at once. The Zephyrians unleashed their fury. Lances of fire slashed across the void. Plasma storms tore through the black. The Defiant twisted, rolled, darted, shield sparking under the strain. Rick's console lit red. Starboard shields down to 20%. Hold them, Jake barked. Another beam cut across space, grazing the hull. Metal screamed, alarms flared. The bridge filled with smoke. Amy's voice broke. We can't take another hit like that. Then we won't, Jake said. His eyes burned with that same impossible calm. He pointed to the largest crimson ship, the Zephyrian command vessel, its hull crawling with antennae and strange organic growths. Target their flagship. Cut off the head, and the body will falter. Lisa stared at him. Jake, that ship could take 10 of us. Maybe. But let's see how much of us they can take before they fall. The Defiant lunged. Torpedoes screamed into the dark. Plasma cannons thundered. The flagship returned fire, a beam tearing across the void, clipping the Defiant's flank. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. Pete roared over comms. Engines crippled. We've got minutes before we're dead in the water. Smoke filled the bridge. The crew coughed, but their hands never left their stations. Jake's voice cut through the chaos. Then we make these minutes count. The ship dove, engines blazing, closing the impossible distance. Rick's eyes widened at his readings. Sir, we're too close. If they hit us now. They won't, Jake said. Because he believed. Not in luck. Not in technology. But in humanity's refusal to surrender. The Defiant broke through a storm of fire, scarred but unbroken, and lined up its guns on the enemy flagship. Fire everything, Jake ordered. The bridge of the Defiant shook as though the ship herself screamed in defiance. Alarms wailed. Sparks rained from ruptured panels. The void outside blazed with fire. Yet through the chaos, the human warship surged forward. Her guns roared one last time, a storm of plasma and torpedoes lashing the crimson flagship. The projectiles struck like meteors, tearing into alien armor, carving fire across its hull. For the first time in centuries, a Zephyrian command ship faltered. Amy Brooks cried out, disbelief and hope colliding in her voice. Direct hit. Their shields are collapsing. The enemy vessel staggered. Its crimson glow dimmed, patterns faltering across its surface. Around it, the collective fleet hesitated, confused, unsettled. The hive mind had been wounded, and in that wound was silence. Lisa White gripped her console. Her face was streaked with smoke, but her eyes burned with fire. They're pulling back formation. Captain, we broke them. For a moment, the impossible became real. A single human warship had forced 14 predators to recoil. Jake Martinez stood tall amid the ruin of his bridge. Blood traced a line across his temple, but his gaze was steady. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried. Then we don't stop now. We finish this. Pete Davis's gravel voice rasped over the comm, half drowned by the roar of damaged engines. Captain, she's coming apart at the seams. Another push like that and we'll tear ourselves to pieces. Jake's reply was simple. Then let's tear with purpose. The crew understood. Not because he explained, but because they believed. They had seen what surrender meant. They had heard the silence of a people absorbed. They would not let Kepler Station fall. The Defiant dove once more, battered engines flaring with stolen seconds of life. She drove straight at the Zephyrian flagship, closer than any sane commander would dare. Distance closing, Rick Stone reported, his voice hoarse but steady. 2 kilometers, 1, weapons locked. The flagship answered with fury. A lance of fire erupted, slashing through the Defiant's flank. Metal screamed, bulkheads ruptured. The ship lurched violently, throwing crew to the deck. Amy's station went dark. She gasped, clutching her arm, blood soaking her sleeve. Still, she dragged herself upright, fingers clawing at the backup systems. Captain, weapons still online. Jake met her gaze. He nodded once. Fire. The Defiant unleashed her full wrath. Plasma bolts hammered into the enemy's heart. Torpedoes streaked in, detonating deep within ruptured armor. The Zephyrian flagship convulsed, explosions chaining through its hull, crimson fire spilling into the void. And then, silence. The command ship was gone. The remaining 13 ships wavered, their formation breaking. Without the hive's voice, they were fractured, not defeated, but lost. Slowly, they turned away, retreating into the black. On the bridge of the Defiant, no one cheered. The crew simply sat in stunned silence, breathing ragged, eyes wide. They had survived. They had won. Kepler Station's comms came alive. A flood of voices, children crying, families shouting, prayers whispered into the void. Gratitude poured from every channel, raw and desperate. Rick slumped against his console, tears streaking his soot-stained face. "They're alive, Captain. We saved them." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Not the victory. Not the glory. The lives. That was what mattered. But beyond Kepler Station, the galaxy was watching. On distant screens aboard Centauri and Vega vessels, alien envoys whispered in disbelief. The hegemony observers sent frantic transmissions, their cold voices breaking with something dangerously close to awe. Every recording was already racing through the faster-than-light networks. Every government, every empire, every council chamber in the galaxy would see what had just happened. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had stood against the Zephyrian collective, and the collective had bled. On the bridge, Lisa White finally spoke, her voice low, almost reverent. "Jake, do you know what this means?" He looked out into the void, where wreckage drifted like ash, where silence replaced laughter. His expression was unreadable. "It means," he said softly, "that humanity will never be ignored again." The crew sat in silence, the truth sinking deep. This was no longer about Kepler Station. No longer about orders or politics or even survival. This was about a spark. A beginning. A shift in the story of the galaxy. The youngest species had shown its teeth. And in doing so, it had changed everything. Pete Davis's voice broke through once more, weaker now, strained. "Captain. I've got half my systems held together with prayer and duct tape. If we don't dock soon, she'll break apart on her own." Jake nodded slowly. "Set course for Kepler. Let's bring her home." The ship turned, limping toward the fragile station. Behind her, the wreckage of giants burned silently. As the stars watched, a message spread across the galaxy. A message carried not by words, but by fire. That humanity, fragile, reckless, stubborn humanity, had entered the great game. Not as children. Not as observers. But as players. And somewhere, in the deep halls of the Galactic Council, voices would whisper in fear. For if one human warship could wound the collective, what might a fleet accomplish? What might humanity become, if given time? Jake Martinez sat heavily in his chair, exhaustion pressing down like gravity. Yet in his eyes burned something the galaxy had forgotten. Not power. Not arrogance. But will. The will to stand when no one else would. The will to fight when the rules said surrender. The will to choose what was right. Even at impossible cost. And in that moment, amid smoke and ruin, the Defiant was more than a ship. She was a symbol. A light in the darkness. A reminder that even in the coldest void, courage could ignite. And the galaxy would never forget.